Hello, and welcome to another World of UX podcast. I'm your host, Darren Hood. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. A special welcome to everybody who's joining us, who's tuning in, who's listening for the very first time. Welcome, welcome, and welcome. We're going to continue the topic that we started last week, where the topic was unmuddying the waters of UI, UX. And we specifically are mentioning it that way because of some things that we encountered on social media. And those conversations, if you want to call them conversations, those conversations continued. And it was really shocking to see there were quite a few people who were part of these interactions, either people who were making statements, some of which I'm going to share with you in a few moments, and some who were sharing their comments in reaction to what was going on. I'm going to give you a little bit of a history. I'm going to mention some things that we talked about last week, and then we'll build on that just a little bit. Again, in 2011, I began noticing something in the discipline of user experience. It was a beautiful discipline. I loved it. I still love UX. I love doing the work. I love solving the problems. I love driving wins for users, for the business, for the teams. I love helping people achieve higher levels of UX maturity. I just love the discipline. I know what the discipline is. There was a time when we did have difficulty defining it. I've talked about this many times. And eventually it came to a point where I could define it, I understood it, and just fell in love with the discipline even more. But in 2011, I started to notice something. I spent some time in my professional career prior to being in UX full-time. I spent some time working in instructional design. Some people would call it the short term, which is training. Some people call it learning experience. I actually coined that phrase in about 2013, 2014. There's people that say they coined that phrase. They didn't. I was saying it before, people who were claiming that they did. But I just started to notice that a lot of the things that we were doing in instructional design, in learning experience, they were the same in what we did not call UX at the time, but information architecture, interaction design, user-centered design, whatever you want to call it back then. Who cares? What we should care about is the fact that what I started noticing, the thing that was similar, was that in instructional design, there were a lot of people who did not understand it. There were a lot of people who didn't bother to understand it, but still took upon themselves to declare what it was. Even though they didn't understand it, they started having people who didn't understand the work. They started giving those people the responsibility for doing the work. And when all these things were happening, it started to degrade, to devalue, to really sort of just completely dismantle instructional design. And it turned it into something that it was not. It turned it into this thing where people would just start putting together a PowerPoint presentation, reading it. They knew nothing about the science behind it. They knew nothing about what it meant to drive proper learning experiences. And these people started to overrun the discipline. And that was when I wasn't invested in instructional design at the time, not like I am in UX, but I'm like, wow, the future of instructional design is pretty bleak. This is pretty tough, and I don't know how I'm going to navigate things going forward. But I was also at the same time starting to pivot, and I was starting to get involved in what we now call UX. And eventually I just fell in love with UX and said, you know what? That's looking pretty shady, and that's not the reason that I'm getting out, but I just love this, and I think I'm a fit for it. I think I'm made for it. I'm going to go in this direction. So that's when I pivoted in my career with regard to just going after UX and focusing on UX totally. And I jokingly refer to it as mortgaging my future in UX and just going in this direction. Well, in 2011, I started seeing the same things that I saw in instructional design. I started seeing the same things start to happen in the world of user experience. And by now, we started calling it UX. And so this was really very concerning to me. I started to blow the whistle, not being a crybaby, not whining like some very, very incivil people will say that I'm doing. I started to point things out. Hey, there's a problem, and we need to give this some attention, or this is going to turn into something that we're going to have it's going to be very difficult to manage this problem when it becomes a tree. It's only just sprouting now. Let's take care of it now. Let's address it now. People in the discipline said that they started fighting against me then. And they said, just shut up. You're crazy. Why are you talking about that? And they pretty much belittled what I was saying. They just made it out to be nothing. And so I did not see people. I was one of the only people at that time that was putting forth any kind of effort to let people know what was going on so that we could take action while it was still in its infantile state. We could take a stand for the discipline. Well, people didn't listen. People blew me off. What I was talking about didn't mean anything. Well, we're in 2025 now. And now let's revisit that siege. I said that UX was under siege. That was the phrase that I used. Now, let's look at some of the things I talked about last week. And this is where it comes into play. This is becoming a new move. People were not talking about this. Not even 2 years ago, 3, 4, not even a year ago. People were not out on social media, in the community, in the UX community, calling themselves enlightening people by saying that we're making a mistake by saying, in this case, UI, UX, the truth is UX, UI, trying to act like this combo acronym has any merit. It doesn't. So people are doing this. And we'll get to the point I'm trying to make in a minute. You had somebody that was saying that what is UI/UX design? Well, the UI is the look and UX equals the field. And I let these people know and I let the other people know, actually, it's incorrect. And this is the way you should be approaching it. I have taken upon myself all of these years, talking about mortgaging your future, taking a stand, like I've been taking a stand. I've been basically sacrificing myself because people get angry with me. People fight against me. People have mobilized against me because of doing these types of things. When there's a lot of people who've been around as long as I have, and in some cases longer, who do not spend any time trying to right this ship. They leave me out there on an island by myself. That's not fair either. And for the people who do care to take these things into account, they know and understand that what I'm saying is true. People were starting to do this. They felt that they were enlightening people by saying, you know, when you're doing UI, UX, you're bringing together user needs and company goals. There's nothing new about this. So these people say things and they act like they're shedding light on something they are not. And a lot of this is as soon as you say UI/UX, as soon as you use a slash, you've already lost the battle. As soon as you use a slash, that is an improper use of grammatical punctuation, or however you want to refer to it as. When you use a slash, you're implying that things are interchangeable. When you're using the slash, you're saying that they are the same. They're not the same. UI is a subset of UX, or it is a completely separate discipline. So when people say UI/UX or UX/UI, they're misrepresenting both disciplines, actually, because they're not interchangeable. One is a subset of the other, and one is just it's huge in comparison to the other. This has gotten worse. And I've never in my 30-year career heard anybody say something like this. This siege against UX is especially by visual designers who have really since 2011 barnstormed the world of user experience. And I'm not saying that people who are in visual design can't come into UX. Not saying that by any stretch. I know some people who've made the transition. They do a great job and they understand it. They respect the discipline, but there's a lot of people out there who do not respect the discipline at all. They're trying to take up space in UX by any means necessary, and they're misrepresenting who they are. Listen to this. This is, again, I've never heard anything like this. And a lot of people who I have shared this with said the same exact thing. Never seen anything like this. This person said, When I came along and said, it's not UI/UX, because somebody said that UI comes first. That's what led into this. A person said UI comes first and the UX results from that. You can't do the UX worse. They're actually first. They're actually saying that. That couldn't be further from the truth. So we're having this dialogue, and the person who has been doing UX about that long, by the way, and is trying to teach me what UX is. and this is something else. The mere fact that people who just got involved in UX are trying to teach or shed light on people who've been doing this for a long time, that is Dunning-Kruger personified. That is arrogance. People say I'm arrogant. I'm not arrogant. I'm presenting facts. Arrogant people don't present facts. Arrogant people present their stance that they won't move off of no matter how much data you present, which also people who are grounded in anchoring bias do the same thing. These things are hurting us, folks. Listen to this. The dialogue is going on. I'm trying to let them know UX comes first. So UX is a moniker. UX comes first. You have to do the UX work and then you do the UI. And the person is like, basically, no, UX is the result. I'm reading this here for those of you listening by way of audio podcast, and you're not looking at the video. People who are looking at the video, you can actually see the screen in front of you here. He said, UX is the result of interaction with the product. Now, in general, is that a true statement? It is, but it isn't. Listen to what he went on and said. It cannot come first. He said UX cannot come first. He said planning through it without UI in context is throwing dust in the eyes, which most UXers really do, and which ends up in a great strategy behind the scenes, but a crappy UI for the user. I've been doing it all my life and never put out a crappy UI. Not true. Which this person hasn't been around to see that. They don't know that. They just literally just started in UX and learned this from somebody else who probably hasn't been around for any length of time. And if they present UX like this, it makes a lot of money for them, but it destroys, it dismantles the discipline. The person said, if not second, it comes together with UI, but not first. Someone else came along, the person who actually I was in the bigger part of the conversation with, comes along and said, exactly, they're both wrong. They're both wrong. And I said, I've actually been doing this for 30 years. I hate mentioning that. I mention it only to hoping to give people some context, not to vault myself above them, but to try to get them to see, wait, how are you who just started trying to declare something that you just learned about? It's not possible, folks. It's actually, I've been doing this for 30 years, since before it was called UX. If the foundational work, which we'll explain in a moment, is not done, you can still have a UI. Also, in general, a UX will always result. That's why there's bad UX out there. And if the UI precedes the UX work, you're going to have a bad UX. That's pretty much guaranteed. Can you make a good UI without a UX? Well, it's the blind squirrel factor. Even a blind squirrel can find a nut. But that doesn't mean that you did things the right way. And I said, technically, proper UX, if it's not done, if the strategic and foundational work is not completed, people that are just learning UX need to understand this. Now, the people who don't, they're convincing people in low UX maturity orgs that what they're doing when they do UI first is correct. They're teaching them that it's possible. They are presenting a speed that is not preceded by expertise. That is a losing proposition. And when those people start losing, they're going to jettison the people that are presenting this type of a mindset. Consider the following. Look at this. This is Jesse James Garrett's 5 planes illustration. And this was presented in about 2002. And this shows how design is approached. You start by understanding the user needs and what the objectives are. You start by specifying what are the functional specifications. You start by understanding what the requirements are. It's not until you understand what the user and business needs are, it's not until you understand what the requirements and what the functional specifications are that you can even begin to work on anything that is going to be presented to users. You simply can't do it, not and be successful. You have to do that before you work on the information architecture. You have to do that before you start laying out the interaction design. You have to do that before you start working on the navigation at the force plane and working on that interface, the UI, and then that visual design, that last piece, the presentation layer. You cannot do that. You cannot present it properly without the other 4 planes being done. Asterisk. You can, but it won't work because you do not know what the user needs are. You do not know what the business objectives are. So you don't know what you're facilitating. You don't know what the mental models are. All of that work, that's all UX. That comes first. You have to have the bones. You have to have the sinews, look, using a body metaphor. You have to have the capillaries. You have to have everything that's happening beneath the surface in our body before you put the skin on it, before you put the eyelids on it, before you take care of all the things on the surface. You cannot have a properly structured, a properly functioning presentation layer without the strategy that it's supposed to be on top of all hammered out. It simply can't be done, not and done properly, folks. Think about the double diamond. And this was somebody presented this, just went and grabbed this off the web just to talk about the double diamond. But you have to discover, then you have to define, then you develop, and then you deliver. You cannot do design work properly without doing this divergent work and then converging. And then you diverge again, and then you converge again. You can't do the UI first, asterisk, and not do it properly. Anybody can put together a UI. That doesn't mean that it's going to work. And that's why there was work that was done by Vitamin T back in about 2017, 2018, where they were saying that, if my memory serves me correctly, it's either 97 or 98%. I believe it was 97. 97% of user experiences are wrong. And part of the reason why we're having that issue, not because of this, do the UI first. It was because people were not doing the discovery work and the definition work. They weren't diverging and converging properly in the design process. A lot of them were just rolling things out because a lot of visual designers were sort of really bulldozing their way into UX roles. Oh man, some of us, we did something recently. I've talked about this before, how you can learn how an organization is structured by going to a place like LinkedIn, search for a company. When you go to the company page, then you can go to people. After you select people, you can put in UX, enter the phrase UX, and look at all the UX people in that organization who are in LinkedIn, of course, will then be displayed. And you can go and look at the backgrounds of everybody. And a couple of us, I talk about this all the time. And I had someone that I was interacting with and who was along for the ride on this one. And I went to LinkedIn and I went to a particular company. I won't tell you what company it was, but we did this exercise and we looked at a sizable chunk of people who worked at this company. We started with the directors. We looked at the managers. We looked at the seniors, and then we went down and we looked at some of the entry-level people. And at this particular organization, who I already knew had a UX problem, a UX maturity problem, but we went but this company, the name of the company just came up. It wasn't, I knew this, let's look at this to facilitate or to support a bias. It just so happened that this company's name came up, but that's who we went and looked at. I just happened to know something about them. We looked at all these people, the directors, former creative directors and art directors, managers, former creative directors and art directors, seniors, former graphic designers, former visual designers. This whole organization, they had a bias toward visual designers. This is something that's happening quite broadly across the discipline, but now these are people, in many cases, they never really transitioned into the discipline. In UX, we're not married to what we design. In the visual design world, they're married to what they design. And it's a very ego-laden, a very ego-driven discipline. Somebody might disagree with me. Okay, prove me wrong. You have the right to disagree, but prove me wrong. Stop just saying you disagree and then people believe you because you're entitled. Present some actual data that backs that up. And you don't have to go and document it all the time. It doesn't take much to go and present. It doesn't take much to prove what I'm telling you, but I can prove it. And I'm proving it now. Go do it. Go do the exercise. You will see that a lot of teams out there, especially go look at these FANG organizations that everybody worships. And you will find that a lot of the people, they're not coming from a genuine, pure UX background. Now people are like lynching me, trying to digital lynch me because I mentioned pure UX. You know there's pure UX. You know there's a cult of UX where people are just like people saying things like what I just showed you, where they're saying that UI precedes UX. That's a cult. And when you present things that people can go back and validate, they don't look at it. They completely ignore you. They run out and find other people in their little sycophantic circles who are going to support that stuff, but they cannot prove me wrong. Disagree with me all you want, but you can't prove me wrong. You can't. You can't. And I know you can't. People are trying to do UX work. They're trying to jump straight to the end of the double or the triple diamond and say that that's the way that you do the work. And that's not true. That is destructive. It does not bring value. And it is taking teams down a slippery slope of defeat. And nobody wants to experience defeat. Nobody wants to go through that. Folks, pure UX happens here. It happens in the first phase. You can't see my cursor. It happens in the first diamond, not in the second diamond. There's not one diamond to do the work, whether it's a single or double or a triple diamond. There's no single diamond approach to the work. And that's what these people are saying. They're saying that there is a single diamond. That is an amateurish, unprofessional, malpractice-oriented way to do UX work. Do not do that. Please don't do that. Let's look at design thinking. Some of those same people say they're all in on design thinking. Well, here's one of the popular models about design thinking. Where does the work take place? First, you empathize. That's where you take the time to, I hate the fact that they use the term there because a lot of people don't know what empathy is, but it is what it is. But empathizing is about understanding. It's about understanding the perspectives of the people who are going to be using your product. And frankly, it's not just about them. It's about understanding what you're trying to do from a business perspective. What problems are you trying to solve? What are you trying to facilitate? What types of affordances are you trying to give your customers, your users? All of that happens at the empathy stage. Then you define it. You start to lay things out. You take all that data, of which research is a part of that, folks, and you start to ideate. And it's not until you do those three things. You can see the parallels with the 5 planes. You can see the parallels with the double diamond or with the triple diamond. But all of this happens, this empathizing and the defining takes place before you start to ideate and prototype. It happens first. You don't ignore empathizing and defining. You don't write those off and jump straight into ideation. You can, and you might even find a degree of success. But in general, it's not going to work because you're crap shooting, you're spitballing. If you do empathy work and you do the proper defining of your work, if you include that with your work, you will be able to specify exactly what needs to be done in order to design a product that's going to win. Folks, that's the way that things work. You understand first, then you explore, then you materialize. You don't jump straight into exploring and then into materializing and act like you've done something. You're spitballing, you're taking a risk. And don't forget, proper UX work includes risk mitigation. Do not forget that, folks. Do not forget that. Bringing this in for a landing. I say this all the time, and many of you have already seen this before, where I'm sharing the illustration of what I call the landscape of UX. If you ever see my talk on the 4 pillars of UX, if you've ever seen that, this illustration comes up. I'm going to be updating it very, very soon. But heuristics and usability, that's supposed to take place during those foundational stages, during those formative stages of your work. Information architecture, that's going to happen earlier on. The research, all these things happen before you get to the interface and the interaction design, folks. It happens before that. And if you try to do the work and jump straight to the interaction interface design and leave the other parts of the work out, again, that is a malpractice, an act of malpractice. As a UX professional, you are robbing yourself. You are not only, people who do that are not only doing great harm to themselves, to their teams, to their customers, to their users, they're doing harm to everybody else out here who's practicing it, because the people that they support and those customers and those stakeholders, those people talk. And that's why some people want to get rid of the UX teams in their organizations, because of things like this. And these things, ironically, they seem to cover more ground faster than doing the work the right way. This is why people think that UX is a bottleneck, this kind of stuff, because people are doing the work wrong. They don't have the confidence, they don't have the understanding, they don't have a grasp on the fundamentals. And so they end up, these problems come out of the work. And then even when it appears they're moving fast, they really aren't. Deploying something fast that everybody has to go back and fix, that's not fast. Fast becomes a mirage. When you do work the right way, now you're not having to double back and fix things. Yes, the work is iterative, but iterative how? Iterative in a responsible manner, or iterative in an irresponsible manner that causes people to do a bunch of work unnecessarily? Folks, this is what's going on with this whole UX, UI brouhaha, if you will, where people are confused about the two. The illustration I just showed you, that's what UX is. It's those 250 things and then some. That's what UX is. And a huge chunk of that, if you want to do work the right way, if you want to be successful, you have to do UX first. The UI is going to be done as a part of UX. It's done on the top of that. Then you're going to go back and you're going to look at it from a summative perspective. You're going to go back and you will iterate at times, and you're using UX to get those things done. You're not going to graphic design yourself to a point of success. Not going to happen. Not in a sustainable way. It's not. So let's remember that today. Let's strive to do UX the right way. Remember, folks, there is pure UX and there's a cult of UX. People are, again, angry with me about it, and that's fine. You're going to be angry. Be angry. A lot of them are angry because they didn't come up with what I'm talking about, but they know it to be true. Prove me wrong. Stop making a big deal out of the fact you disagree with me, and prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. You can. And I know that. But folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for taking the time to listen today. Tell people out there, if they want to learn about pure UX, check out the show. There's people, more and more people are starting to tell me how much they appreciate the show, how much they appreciate me taking a stance, how much they appreciate me pointing toward the North Star. Let's get it right today, folks, and let's drive wins for UX. So that's all the time we have for today. We're going to sign off here. Until next time, this is Darren Hood, the host of the World of UX, wishing everybody all the best. And until next time, happy UX, everybody.